This is, and always has been, and will be, the greatest spectacle in racing. This is the Indianapolis 500.
It ends here, but the month of May celebration in Indianapolis starts here. With 20,000 people running a little more than 13 miles from downtown Indianapolis to and around the world's greatest race course and back to the center city. This is a month-long celebration of Hoosier spirit and community, of pride and tradition. And the driving force behind it all for the past 60 years, the 500 Festival, which also includes hosting one of the nation's largest parades. Learn more about its mission, challenges, and what's next as we get the lowdown from 500 Festival CEO Bob Bryant on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. And I'm pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by 500 Festival CEO Bob Bryant. Bob, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And here we are. May has arrived. The 500 Festival obviously has a lot going on year round. But when you get to May, you get to that week before and that first week in May, do you get a bit of an adrenaline rush, or what's it like being the captain of the 500 Festival?
Well, when you've got 20 full-time staff and 11 full-time interns and 3,000 volunteers and 33 board directors, and we're ready for May, so this is our wheelhouse. It's what we all enjoy doing. So to finally be in May is it's an exciting feeling for us. And we're kind of, as soon as May's over, we'll be ready for the next one, so we're excited to be here.
Yeah. You do so many events throughout the year. I think the number is at 30 or so, which is a full plate. Perhaps the highest profile, certainly one of them, is the mini marathon just concluded. That has turned into such an elite event, a big event in the running world. What in your view, what's led to the success? Because I think 30,000 plus runners.
Yeah, it's been one of the largest in the country really since the late 70s. But it's also, we like to say, our goal is not to be the biggest, but to be the best. And so we've also had, I think we're in our fourth year in a row being named the best half marathon in the country by USA Today. So, we're excited when we can, keep raising the bar and be a great event. But really the history was an idea of running from downtown, and it used to finish at the track. Now we do a full lap around IMS, but it used to finish at the Yard of Bricks finish line. And that very first one, a guy coming off 2 Olympic medals in the marathon, Frank Shorter, signed up for it because he thought it would be really interesting to finish at IMS. And registration doubled because Frank was very well known in what was then a new sort of running movement. And he's come back every year since. So he does the broadcast for us from out at the track where he actually won it that first year. He's at the expo handing out, bags and shirts, and he is just all in for this. And he's let us know that in the running community, this has always been unique because it wasn't started by elite runners. It was started by a community, and it remains really a community event.
Yeah. History, tradition, so much a part of certainly the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the 500, and the 500 Festival. Take us back, Bob, to the creation, the inception of the 500 Festival, which I think was in 1957. So it's been around for quite a while. How did it all get started?
You are correct on that. Started in the late 50s. The only one like it in the country is the Kentucky Derby Festival. It started the year before we did. Community leaders at the time, so what is now we know as Visit Indy, Chamber of Commerce, some retailers, and the Indy Star as well at that time, really kept seeing how the Indy 500 itself was growing, and the whole community was being known for it. The state was being known for it. They were adding seats, adding attendance. It was getting worldwide coverage, and it was sort of like, what do we do as a community to come around that, or even to benefit from that? They'd had that in mind for a couple of years, and then they happened to go down to the Kentucky Derby, and there was a parade, and they met some of the founders of that Kentucky Derby Festival, and they said, okay, we don't want to be second to anyone. We got to get going. So they came back, formed a nonprofit community organization, broad mission that still exists today. It was enrich lives, create positive community impact, and celebrate the Indy 500. In some ways, beyond celebrating, it was leveraging being the home to that for greater value in the community. The Holman George family at the time said they were all for it. They had their hands full with what they needed to do at the track, and they thought anything they could do to support the community, they were happy to support it. We have an interesting bylaws that go back to the 50s of 33 board directors, which matches the number of drivers in the race. There was an interesting history of being able to have these festival parade cars that they could drive those drivers in the parade. And then there was even a link that 2 of those 33 positions on the board would be leadership from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So Mary Holman George has been on the board, Tony George has been on the board. And of course, now we've got Doug Bowles and Ellen Saul. Allison Melanchthon had a 6-year term on the board prior to that. So it's just been a unique relationship between the two. I can tell you that Roger Penske, when he bought the track, he asked for the 500 Festival annual report. And then when he read through all the things that we do, he said, I want a case of them, and I want everybody back at Penske in Detroit to know what this community is doing. So he is fully supportive. He loves, obviously, tradition and history. And so we've just continued this great relationship to work alongside IMS as they do things in the community as well, but to really identify what are those things that we can get behind and how can we extend the value of being the home to the Indy 500.
Yeah, you mentioned tradition and the mission that has not changed of the 500 Festival, but times change. Is it a challenge to keep true to that mission, but also modernize and continue to innovate and continue to keep yourself relevant?
Oh, absolutely. I think when you look back, there were fun moments where, the first professional golf tournament at the Brickyard Golf Course was a 500 Festival event. And it had, winners like Gary Player. We had participants like Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus and people like that. So, it at one point that we hosted the world's largest gin rummy tournament. So it's had a variety of events and programs. Some obviously are consistent. I think the Princess program and the parade are 2 of the longest running consistent. But even those we modernize and stay up to date with what we need to do. The Princess program is no longer a pageant. It's all about scholarship, civic engagement, to community improvement, scholarship, things like that. The parade, we've taken a look at even the Grand Marshal and said, what story can we bring to light that's really worth telling, that has a Hoosier or an Indiana connection, but is something that is beneficial to our community to tell. And so we stay relevant in that way. There are certainly, we're not locked into anything. If there are things that we're doing that become, maybe less relevant or the times have changed, then like I said, we don't do all the exact same events and programs we did, 60 plus years ago. And we do add some things. I think from an addition standpoint, I can tell you that when we really fully realized that the IU Health 500 Festival Mini Marathon is so significant just in the scope of the running industry, we kind of said, well, what other runs do? And is there something that we could be leveraging even that event for greater community good? That's led to youth health and fitness programming. So we have something called Kids Fit. We have a rookie run at our Kids Day. And now we're reaching thousands of kids every year with health and fitness goals and initiatives. And so that's been a big growth, is how do we realize that, keeping Hoosiers healthy is actually a byproduct of the mini itself being so large.
You mentioned storytelling as it relates to the parade chairman, if you will, the Grand Marshal. And this year, that story is an interesting one, right? With the former pacer, Scott Pollard.
Yeah, Scott and Dawn, his wife, have been involved in different 500 Festival events in the past. And so we were aware of them. And when it was really over a year ago when I happened to connect with Scott about the challenge he was having and the need for a heart transplant, the history he had of losing his father when his father was on a transplant list and did not find a donor. When he was a teen and he lost his dad and Scott's got kids, including a teenager. And so he felt like history might repeat itself. And it's a really remarkable story how they got a donor really at the last minute. And now a year into recovery, he's doing great. and really wanting to tell the story of, getting yourself on that donor list. What's going to be really unique that we're working on right now is it's rare that you actually know the family of the donor. And in this case, Scott and Don have gotten to know that family. No irony here that their last name is Angel. And so we're actually working on bringing the Angel family here to join them in the parade and really celebrate, someone they lost that I believe their decision, which was within 2 days of when he passed, for him to be a donor, I think helped the lives of 4 or 5 different people. So yeah, that's that where we can highlight obviously Scott living here and having a local connection, but a broader story of organ donation and how significant that can be.
Yeah. You mentioned the parade and such a traditional event. Talk about the size and scope of this year's parade, what it's all about, and the challenge, because I was just thinking about this. You're putting on the mini marathon early in the month, the parade later in the month. Those are 2 mega events in 1 month. That has to be a daunting challenge from an organization standpoint.
It really is. I think this community, we talk about it all the time, and I think we should, and I think we should be very proud of it. But Indianapolis is putting on events, large scale events, in a way that most communities don't and maybe couldn't. And so when you look at the support of the medical community, of IMPD, of Homeland Security, even Secret Service and state police, the fire department, Department of Public Works, just the entities in this community that are prepared to help and know how to do things well, and how they work with both, local, state, and even federal agencies to ensure that things are done well and done safely. That's a big help. The other clear piece that, doesn't happen everywhere is volunteerism here. And so when you look at 3,000 volunteers overall in the month of May, filling about 5,000 positions, it's very significant relationship. And so now you actually have multi-generational volunteer leaders that are a part of very large committee meetings leading up to this that have very relevant and significant positions. That and developing a professional staff. If you go even 20 years back in our history, the board directors themselves might have been figuring out where to get porta-johns and where to put up bike rack and get city permits and things like that. Now we have a truly professional staff with a significant leadership in our operations department alone that is putting on those events, because that's the kind of expertise you need. So it's just such a great combination. And I can tell you that we definitely are the envy of other organizations that put on events, just in the way, not just that we do it, but we do it well, and we enjoy working together on it. So I think that spirit of teamwork really exists throughout the community. And without it, I think this would be a bigger headache, obviously, than it is. But we enjoy doing it, and this community enjoys putting it on.
Yeah. You mentioned Homeland Security and Secret Service. The reality of putting on a major event like the mini marathon or the parade, security and the different levels that have been added over the last number of years. How does that security, that national security piece, really, to an extent, I don't want to say complicate, but add to the organizational challenges?
I would say, again, this community is really good at knowing, if you go back to the days of either a Pan Am Games or a Super Bowl or Final Fours and the championships we've hosted, things like that, I think there's a really good line of communication. So a lot of times these days, you're just talking about what are the assets that need to be put in place, who has them, who controls them, and then where is the hierarchy involved, who has to tell who to do, to do what. And I think that's really what we've streamlined here, so that if someone needs to work with the Indiana National Guard, which goes through the governor's office, or someone needs to work with IMPD through the mayor's office, or if Department of Public Works has to come alongside, what are those assets we're using to secure intersections, things like that, to be safe. It's a great line of communication that already exists. And it definitely is helpful that it's something that we continue to do in this market, that we continue to put on large scale events. It allows us to be current and to know how to bring all those assets together.
How many folks do you expect downtown for the parade this year?
The parade typically is in the number is about 250 to sometimes upwards 300,000 people. It'll be downtown for that. About 10% of that, so maybe about 24,000 seats, are actually sold. which is a big help to us as a nonprofit organization. Those registrations for the mini marathon and those tickets sold for the parade are very meaningful to us from a fundraising standpoint. But the bulk of everybody coming down, it's a free of charge event, and it's very well attended, and it's also one of the highest rated broadcasts that weekend throughout the state as well.
Yeah. What can you pinpoint your biggest challenge? If you had to say one thing that's the biggest challenge during the month of May, what would that be?
Well, it's interesting that we really enjoy what we do, and I think the way the board, the volunteers, the princesses, the staff, the intern, the organization in cooperation with IMS, there's a lot of joy in it, to be honest. There's just you enjoy being a part of this platform that the community comes together. The month of May is so unique. Clearly, you're always going to be concerned about the experience of the participants, trying to get all of your logistics right, trying not to have hiccups, trying to have a smooth experience, just like you would, if you were running IMS or, Gainbridge Fieldhouse or Lucas Oil Stadium. You're doing it in public streets, and you want a similar experience for everybody. So safety, security, managing those crowds and ingress and egress parking, those are the parts that you're wanting to do right. I will tell you, the concern is typically the one thing you have no control over, which is the weather.
The weather, yeah.
The weather's kind of everything, and I tell people that in a large scale community event line of work, if it's 72 and sunny, people think that you are just absolutely nailing it. They can look past any hiccup or moment because it's just beautiful out and they're glad to be out. We're coming out of winter. This is our rite of passage, the month of May. So great weather makes you just look like a hero. If you get something that is difficult weather, then there's a lot of things people may not like, right? Because it's just not, you're just in a different mindset when you want to be out enjoying yourself. So really the biggest concern at the end of the day winds up being the thing that you can't do anything about, which is what's the weather going to be. And because we do so many things throughout the month of May, almost every weekend, you're looking for 30 days of, clean weather and clear sailing. But then you look at the race last year and what they went through with rain delays and how they actually wound up having a fantastic event and everybody stayed for it and you get through it. So I think people are aware that we can't control the weather. That helps, but that's probably the biggest challenge you have going into each month.
Yeah, Bob, for you, there were so many moments throughout the month of May at the track, off the track that are special. Is there a moment for you? You're so close to it, but is there a favorite moment for you during the month of May?
It's usually stories that not everybody sees or is aware of. I think, a simple one would be if you're at the finish line for the mini marathon and you watch the finishers. I always say go at the 3-hour mark, because the people that are finishing in over 3 hours have challenged themselves to something really significant. You'll see people go down on their knees. You'll see people go into prayer. You'll see people just in tears. You'll see the emotional outpouring of challenging yourself to do something like that. And that's a really meaningful and fun time. I think the memorial service that we do, the American Legion 500 Festival Memorial Service, we have come alongside Gold Star families and survivor outreach to become something really meaningful for those Gold Star families who've lost a loved one in active duty. So we do the Gold Mile at the mini marathon, where they can come out and actually represent their fallen heroes and get people to really understand maybe a little bit more about what Memorial Weekend is all about. They're involved in the parade. And we have a private ceremony before the public memorial service just for them. And I think that always stands out as something that's really meaningful each year.
Mm-hmm. Much more ahead with 500 Festival CEO Bob Bryant. We'll talk about the economic impact, the educational impact of the 500 Festival. Get a little on Bob's background as well when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank, See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America are men and women building roads and bridges to get Hoosiers where they're going today and a new energy infrastructure that will keep Indiana competitive tomorrow. LIUNA's over 12,000 statewide members also grow local economies, earning good union wages, shopping where they live and work, and paying taxes. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is 500 Festival CEO Bob Bryant. And Bob, obviously May peak time for your efforts at the 500 Festival, but you are a year-round entity, if you will. Talk about a couple of things in terms of impact, and that's the economic impact, because it is substantial that the 500 Festival has.
Yeah, it is significant. We're probably at a clip that, and we had a full study done, and it's probably now, 8-9 years ago that the IU Kelley School of Business did for us. We're obviously not motivated solely by economic impact, but really by social impact and by being a part of what we think is very valuable to this community. But we're likely on a $40-50 million annual clip of direct economic impact. But I think, again, that value from a cultural and social standpoint, I think is valuable, for residents, but also for visitors and also for businesses that are trying to attract talent here. When you recognize that, the Indy 500 has a way of being relevant to you, even if you're not a race fan. So whether you go to the track or not, what you can see something that you can be engaged in and be a part of, and you can see why there's such value to being the home of that event. Whether you want to run the mini marathon, or you're interested in scholarship and leadership development, or whether you're, wanting to keep, your kids healthy and active and fitness minded. I mean, there's just so many different elements that between the race itself, the track, and what the festival has done, that there's really something for everyone. And it doesn't even, have an admission price for a lot of it. So there's something for everyone. And I think that's the real value, is just the cultural fabric of Indiana and the way we come alongside to generate that value via the 500 to be a significant part of that. But the economic piece, it is important, and we're probably, well past $500 million since the inception of direct economic impact. But like I said, our focus is more on how else are we impacting, socially and culturally in other ways to the community.
Yeah, as you look to the future, is there an amount of time you and your staff spend maybe looking at what others are doing around the country? As you think about your programming, again, I think 30 events, are you constantly kind of on the lookout for maybe new things or things you can tweak with current events?
Yeah, we sure are. We are members. I'm just came off the board of directors for the International Festival and Events Association, the IFEA. I have what we call kind of a event CEO group that includes the Rose Bowl and Tournament of Roses. It includes Kentucky Derby Festival, DC Cherry Blossom Festival, Portland Rose Festival, Memphis in May, Chattanooga River Bend, Seattle Seafair, and others. So there is a collection of very large community historic events or festivals, sometimes month-long occurrences like what we do. We're sharing a lot. So we're sharing in terms of challenges and threats, but also sharing quite a bit in terms of what's working and what's new. There's a fall conference every year that we all attend, and there's lots of presentations about, what new events and what new entertaining experiences, things like that are going on. So that's kind of never ending. And we have different members of our staff, whether it's Running USA and their conference that's specific more to the running industry, whether it's the festivals or even parades. We're always extending outreach to figure out what's current, what's new, and what we can be looking for.
Yeah. Let's learn a little bit about Bob Bryant. Bob, where'd you grow up?
I was born in Stuart, Florida, and I've been in a reverse migration pattern ever since. So I spent most of my childhood in North Carolina. I'm a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And a lot of my working career was out of Atlanta, which was kind of our, it's like our nearest big city to reach out for work when you first out of college. So, but I've been in experiences around the world and across the country that have been predominantly in sports and media and entertainment, even the theme park industry and things like that. Never knew that would all come together in one place. And I like to think that between the Indy 500, the 500 Festival in the month of May here in Indianapolis, that it was the one place that those varied experiences came together into one effort. I've been here about 12 years, absolutely the greatest, the best position I've ever had, the greatest experience I've ever had. The support is significant. The way the community appreciates what we do and gets involved in what we do. It has absolutely been, one of the best things that's happened for me personally, but also for my family. So I may not be an original Hoosier, but I've been raising 4 Hoosiers, as we have 4 kids who've all been, going to schools here and growing up here.
That's great. Talk about, you mentioned some of your experience in broadcasting. I think you were, if I'm trying to remember, was it at Turner Broadcasting you spent some time? And talk about some of those experiences and how they really all contribute to make what you're doing now a great thing.
Yeah, I guess, starting on the production side, I actually was a part of a documentary unit at CNN. It was a TBS and CNN hybrid unit that did environmental and social issue documentaries, a series called People Count. Enlisted Jane Fonda to be the studio host for that, and we'd go out and find people making a difference in the world. So there was some production experience, but also seeing people around the world that were wanting to make a difference and seeing how they did that. I went from that to Cartoon Network, and I managed all of our off-channel businesses. So it was how do we leverage all of these, what I kind of called it is I was an agent to animated stars. So as an agent to Cartoon Network characters and finding opportunities for them to generate funds and be involved outside of what they did on air. That included a partnership in tennis. That included a partnership with a NASCAR team. If anybody out there is a race fan on the NASCAR side, if you remember Scooby-Doo on a car and the Flintstones on the car, even we had a pink Powerpuff Girls car at one point in the race in Atlanta that Dale Earnhardt did not appreciate, but it let me know it. But so just a variety of experiences relative to events, to production, to storytelling, and to licensing and partnerships.
Yeah. You live predominantly in the South. When the 500 Festival position was presented to you, what was your initial reaction?
That I would never have a shot. How would they bring someone in who'd never been to an Indy 500? I'd been to a Brickyard with our Cartoon Network Wacky Racing program. I'd been to the NASCAR race. What I will give credit to is the selection committee from the board of directors, the fact that they were open-minded to that and that they felt like they almost wanted outside eyes in sort of opinion and vision. They knew how valuable the festival was, but they kind of felt like maybe it's even more valuable, or maybe there's even something more to it that we don't know. And so their thought process that they would bring someone in that had some of my background and experiences and say, hey, we know it's teed up, we know it does well, but maybe just come in and help us understand where those values are or what we could be doing differently or what we could be doing better. I had a great foundation. The CEO prior to me had really set up the organization to be more professionally managing events and programs, but also more professionally selling. So we do almost every event has a title and/or presenting partner to it. We have 100 plus corporate members, 60 plus very significant corporate sponsorships. So there were a lot of good things going on there, but it did help me really recognize that this community is very fortunate to have something like this organization and the spirit of cooperation that occurs for us to do what we do. And I was just able to bring in some different maybe vision and different experiences to bear on that. But I'll always say I have now that I've been here, I don't know how I got in, but I'm glad that I did.
Well, looking ahead, looking forward, as you think about the 500 Festival and where you'd like the organization and all that it does to be in 5 years, 10 years down the road, is there a kind of a big picture vision for 500 Festival?
Yeah, there always is. I think, doing things safely and securely and organizing yourself well is very important to large events today. So that's one piece of it. The other is the financial stability. We're not immune to inflation and costs. Labor is up, materials are up. The seating for the parade almost had a 20, 30-year run of being the same cost. And then, post-COVID and consolidation, even in temporary seating industry, it might have gone up 3-4 times, so as you incur those challenges within the event industry, floats, we had a company here for 30 plus years that made all our floats, and they went out of business coming out of COVID. So now we have our floats made in Detroit. So actually the parade company in Detroit, Michigan is making floats and bringing them down the highway to us. And we have to store a lot more of those. We have more warehouse needs, things like that. So there's an evolution of how do we stay relevant and how do we stay economically viable. And I think that's where you'll also see the 500 Festival Foundation, which is a separate organization, really organized around fundraising now more than ever. They did their first ever fundraising or capital campaign. We concluded last summer, raised about $3 million. That's all critical for us to keep doing what we do. So I think really morphing even more into the nonprofit space, because we were really kind of, professional event producers with corporate sponsorships and that kind of thing. And now we're coming alongside with that, recognizing we're a nonprofit organization and we need other development and fundraising models to go alongside what we do. So I think financial stability, viability, creating new diverse sources of revenue just to be able to do what we already do has been a part of the long-range vision.
Bob Bryant, the CEO of 500 Festival. Bob, Indianapolis is lucky to have you, and you play such an important role with such an important organization, and it's really part of the fabric of Indianapolis and Indiana as well. So thanks for all you do. Good luck during the month of May. I know it's a really busy month, and I hope to see you around soon.
Thank you so much, and thank you for what you guys do. It's so important that you're sharing the positive stories of how we get things done and the positive news around the state. So really appreciate that.
All right. Bob Bryant, CEO at the 500 Festival. My guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. We're a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes, more than 200, and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Get ready for full throttle coverage as we shift into high gear for Business at the Brickyard, presented by LiUNA with support from the City of Westfield and Daniel's Family Vineyard and Winery. We're giving you the inside track on the powerful connection between motorsports and the Indiana economy. Join us at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for exclusive interviews, behind-the-scenes access, and the stories that drive the business of motorsports. So buckle up and join us for Emmy Award-winning Business at the Brickyard coverage all month long.